July 2nd, 1943. Sicily. The air shimmered with heat as dust rolled over the horizon and German alarm sirens began to scream. American fighters were lifting off again. Among them was one pilot no one expected anything from. No headlines, no attention, no pressure. Second Lieutenant Charles Hall, flying with the 99th Fighter Squadron, the group that would later be known as the Red Tails. These were the first African-American combat fighter pilots in U.S. history. Their very existence was controversial. Newspapers doubted the program. Senior officers whispered, "Will they even be able to fight?" On paper, the Tuskegee program looked like an experiment meant to fail quietly. But war doesn't care about prejudice. War only measures skill and survival. And on this day, history would see the first crack in the wall built against these men long before they even touched a cockpit. Hall patrolled at roughly 5,000 meters when German FW-190s burst through a sheet of clouds, diving toward American bombers. Encounters like this usually ended quickly, and badly, for the bomber crews. But today something different happened. Hall locked onto one of the attacking fighters, held the trigger steady, and watched his tracers bite into the enemy aircraft. The FW-190 peeled away, trailing smoke as it spiraled downward. This was the first confirmed aerial victory by a Tuskegee Airman. But the road to this moment was far harder than the kill itself. In 1941, when the U.S. began expanding its air forces, the Tuskegee program was surrounded by skepticism. Over 13,000 men applied, but only about 1,000 made it through the extreme training. They studied aerodynamics, meteorology, navigation, then trained on PT-17 Stearmans, AT-6s, and finally P-40 Warhawks. Records show instructors often graded them harsher than white cadets. Some admitted after the war, "We tried to wash them out, they just kept passing." Every pilot knew that a single mistake wouldn't just be their failure. People would claim it proved an entire race was unfit to fly. And even after earning their wings, many officers still didn't trust them. Their early missions were deliberately low risk. Coastal patrols, barge escorts, reconnaissance flights. But where other pilots saw routine, these men saw opportunity, a chance to prove they belonged. When the 99th was finally deployed in the Mediterranean, expectations were low. Many assumed they would fail. Instead, victories began to add up. German combat reports from that period mention new American pilots with unusual discipline. The famous nickname Schwarze Vogelmenschen, Black Birdmen, would appear only decades later in interviews, but even in 1943, German units were already noticing them. Not because of who they were, but because of how they flew. The Tuskegee pilots followed orders with surgical precision. They didn't wander off, they didn't chase personal glory, and bomber crews loved them for it. Reports from B-17 and B-24 units repeatedly mention that when these pilots were on escort, losses were lower. After Hall's victory, their reputation began to grow quietly, mission by mission. They were still years away from becoming legends, still months away from the P-51 Mustang and the red tail that would make them famous. But the foundation was already forming, through discipline, accuracy, and an unspoken determination to fight two battles at once, one against the Luftwaffe and one against the prejudice waiting for them at home. What came next, Berlin, the P-51 and the Me-262, would turn these pilots from an experiment into one of the most respected fighter groups of the entire war. By 1944, the air war over Europe had shifted. German aces were still dangerous, but the Luftwaffe was losing veterans faster than it could replace them. And over Italy, the Balkans, and eventually Germany, one fighter group began appearing more and more often, the very unit many American commanders once tried to avoid deploying. The Tuskegee Airmen had received their new aircraft, the P-51 Mustang. Sleek, fast, long range. The plane that allowed them to escort bombers deep into Germany itself. And with it came the signature red-painted tail, a mark that would soon mean safety for bomber crews and trouble for the Luftwaffe. In early 1944, the long-range escort missions began. B-17S and B-24s were easy prey for German fighters, and losses were catastrophic. Commanders wrote urgent requests for elite escort groups. Few imagined that the group to deliver those results would be the one so many once tried to shut down. The 332nd Fighter Group wasn't just effective, they were consistent. Their flight logs show the same pattern again and again. They held formation. They stayed with the bombers. They didn't break away to chase enemy fighters. While other units often left the bombers exposed in pursuit of kills, the Red Tails didn't. Some American officers complained that they were too cautious. Bomber crews strongly disagreed. A new ritual formed among airmen. If the briefing mentioned the Red Tails, crews relaxed. They didn't care about politics, race, or controversy. They cared about making it home alive. And under Red Tail protection, bomber losses dropped from an average of 46 aircraft per series of missions to just 27. These aren't legends. They're numbers recorded in U.S. Army Air Force's documents. Meanwhile, German pilots began noticing the red-tailed Mustangs. Their tactics were unusual: tight formations, disciplined maneuvering, no reckless moves. Former Luftwaffe pilots later recalled seeing the red tails and realizing these Americans were different. Not weaker, not experimental, different. The climax came in 1945. Germany was desperate but not defeated, and then came the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. It was fast, far too fast for most piston-engine fighters. Allied bomber formations were torn apart by these new machines. Many groups didn't know how to counter them. But on March 24, 1945, everything changed. That day, the Red Tails escorted a massive force of American bombers toward Berlin. The Luftwaffe scrambled its remaining Me-262 jets for interception, their last attempt to resist. And in that moment, Tuskegee pilots demonstrated why their discipline mattered. Lieutenant Earl Lane, Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, and Lieutenant Charles Brantley each shot down in Me-262. 3 jets in one day. 3 confirmed kills, cross-verified by American and German records. It was one of the most precise, controlled engagements of the air war. By the end of World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen had achieved 112 confirmed aerial victories, over 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground, and 96 distinguished flying crosses. Their performance helped influence President Harry Truman's 1948 decision to desegregate the U.S. military, a change rooted not in politics alone, but in undeniable combat results. They began as an experiment. They ended as proof that excellence doesn't depend on skin color. Every mission was a battle on 2 fronts, against the Luftwaffe and against the doubts waiting back home. The Red Tails weren't expected to be heroes. History had other plans.